Hi everyone, this is the Nordic Venture Show, your guide to the exciting world of Nordic startups and venture capital. In today's episode, we're exploring a startup called Kvantify.
Ready for a deep dive? Today, we're looking at the future of medicine, and specifically, how quantum computing is poised to completely change drug discovery.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area, and honestly, we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
And we've got some really fascinating insights to unpack today from Kvantify, a company that's, well, they're making some serious waves in the pharmaceutical world.
Definitely. They're all about what they call computational excellence.
Computational excellence. Okay, I like the sound of it, but I have to admit that's not exactly a phrase I throw around at parties. What does that actually mean, though, in plain English?
Sure, so basically it's about applying some serious computing power, really the cutting edge, to these incredibly complex problems you run into in drug development.
Okay, so instead of scientists hunched over microscopes for years on end, we're talking at algorithms crunching data at warp speed.
Essentially, yeah. Think of it like this, right? Trying to find a new drug, it's kind of like trying to find a specific tiny grain of sand on a beach, a really, really big beach.
And with computational excellence, we've got a super-powered metal detector that helps us zero in?
Exactly. That's a great analogy. It's about speed, but it's also about being able to handle a level of complexity that would just, completely overwhelm a regular computer.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And what I find really intriguing is that Kvantify, they're not just, sitting around waiting for this quantum future to arrive, right? They're already building tools, making moves now, using both classical and quantum computing.
Absolutely. They're using kind of a dual strategy, which is incredibly clever, honestly.
It's like what, building a rocket while you're still driving a really fast car?
Exactly. And there's some serious advantages to that approach. I mean, by using the best of both worlds, Kvantify can deliver real value today while they're simultaneously laying the groundwork for these even bigger, more groundbreaking advancements in the future as quantum computing matures.
Right, so they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk.
Mm.
Which brings us to, I have to ask you about this, their Kvantify coffee platform.
I know, it's a catchy name.
It sounds like something out of, I don't know, a science fiction movie or something.
Right. But what they're doing is really anything but superficial. At its core, Kvantify Coffee is this really powerful platform they've built to calculate these incredibly complex things like binding affinity and kinetics.
You're gonna have to refresh my memory on those terms. It's been a while since high school chemistry.
No problem. So imagine you've got a lock and a key, right?
Okay, I'm with you.
Binding affinity basically tells you how well that key fits into the lock. In this case, the key is a potential drug molecule, and the lock is, well, it's the target in the body, maybe a specific protein involved in a disease. And essentially, the stronger the binding affinity, the more likely that drug will actually be effective.
So the tighter the fit, the better. Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about kinetics? Where does that fit into all of this?
All right, so kinetics is all about time. So it tells you how long that key, our drug molecule, will actually stay attached to the lock, the target.
Mm.
And that's really important because a drug might bind really well, but if it detaches too quickly, it's not going to be effective.
Ah, so it's not just about getting the key in, it's about making sure it stays put long enough to actually, do something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And traditionally, figuring out this binding affinity and kinetic stuff, it involved a lot of trial and error in the lab, a lot of guesswork. What Kvantify is doing with coffee is really game-changing because they're using this computational approach. Essentially, it's like having a crystal ball that lets researchers see how effective a drug might be before they even set foot in a lab.
Wow. So instead of endless lab testing, they're basically running simulations, doing all the heavy lifting with algorithms.
Exactly. And it's not just about speed, though. That's a huge advantage in itself, right? This level of computational analysis that Kvantify is doing, it can actually uncover hidden connections, potential drug candidates that might have been totally missed using traditional methods. It's like finding needles in haystacks that we didn't even know existed.
That's pretty incredible when you think about it. But, okay, we've got to circle back to that whole quantum ready thing because, honestly, it's a concept that I find both incredibly exciting and, I'll be honest, a little intimidating.
Yeah, I get that. It's one thing, to say you're quantum ready, but it's another thing entirely to actually be prepared for a technology that's, let's face it, still evolving so rapidly.
Exactly. So what concrete steps is Kvantify taking to make sure they're, like, not caught flat-footed when quantum computing really hits its stride?
That's where their forward-thinking approach really shines through, I think. Basically, they're designing their algorithms and their software architecture to be, adaptable. It allows for really seamless integration with quantum computers as they become more powerful and more commercially accessible.
So it's like they're building a house with, I don't know, adaptable wiring. So you might not have all the fancy gadgets now, but the infrastructure is in place, ready to go when you need it.
That's a great analogy. It's future-proofing, essentially. They're future-proofing their entire approach to drug discovery, which is pretty smart when you think about how rapidly the tech landscape is changing.
Absolutely. And you know what else is smart? This is another thing that really impressed me. They're making all of this computational firepower accessible through the cloud. So no need for these massive, expensive supercomputers taking up space in a lab.
Exactly, exactly. It democratizes access, right?
Yeah.
Smaller companies, startups, universities, even individual researchers can leverage the power of Kvantify's platform without needing, a billion-dollar budget.
I love that. It really levels the playing field, don't you think?
Yeah.
And it fosters collaboration. So instead of everyone competing for limited resources, researchers can actually focus on what matters, which is developing these life-saving treatments.
It's a different approach for sure. And this collaborative spirit, I think it really sets Kvantify apart. They seem to really get that the biggest challenges in drug discovery, I mean, they're so complex that, it really requires a collective effort to solve them.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a refreshing change of pace, I think, from, the traditional kind of cutthroat world of pharmaceuticals.
For sure, for sure. And honestly, I think it speaks to their long-term vision too. It's not just about, turning a quick profit. It's about fundamentally changing the way we approach drug discovery, making it better, faster, more effective. And that's something I can get behind.
Absolutely. It's definitely inspiring, no doubt about it. But, this kind of begs the question, how do you balance this really ambitious vision, this desire to, completely revolutionize healthcare with the very real and often very harsh realities of running a successful business? Because, I mean, we both know drug discovery is incredibly expensive, it's risky, there are no guarantees. So how do they walk that tightrope?
Yeah, it's a great question.
It really is. It's like they're trying to, build the plane while they're flying it.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And because they're constantly refining those algorithms, incorporating new data all the time, their platform just keeps getting more accurate, more powerful. It's a win-win for everyone, really.
And it sounds like their business model, the way they're approaching partnerships, it reflects that long-term vision too, right? I mean, they're not just offering one-off services, they're really trying to build these lasting relationships with pharmaceutical companies.
Absolutely. They're working very closely with their clients, providing, that ongoing support, the expertise, really helping them navigate this incredibly complex world that is drug discovery. It's about building relationships, not just, transactions.
Right, right. It's a partnership, which makes a lot of sense. But, let's step back for a second, look at the bigger picture here. We've talked about how Kvantify is approaching this challenge, but what about the why? What's the driving force behind all of this? What really motivates them?
I think at their core, Kvantify, they're driven by this really deep desire to accelerate medical progress. It's about, making sure that everyone has access to the best treatments, to cures, and they really see computational excellence as the key to unlocking that future.
It's a pretty powerful motivator when you think about it. And it's not just about, discovering new treatments either, right? It's about making those treatments more effective, more targeted, and ultimately more accessible to the people who need them most.
Precisely. So by using these computational methods, right, they can identify those promising drug candidates early on, optimize their design, and that really increases the odds that those new treatments will be successful when it really counts in clinical trials, and eventually, getting those treatments to the patients who desperately need them.
It's like they're, increasing the odds of success at every stage of the game?
Exactly, exactly.
Which is incredibly exciting when you really think about the implications for patients, for families who are facing these really challenging diagnoses.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that this technology, I mean, it's not limited to just one specific disease or one area of medicine, right? The potential applications here are just vast, and they're constantly expanding.
So we're not just talking about, incremental improvements here. We're really talking about a potential paradigm shift in how we approach, healthcare as a whole.
I think that's a great way to put it. That's what makes Kvantify's work so compelling. They're not just developing new technologies, they're shaping the future. And I think they're asking the important questions about what that future should look like.
And it's a future I am definitely excited to see unfold. Well, on that note, I think we've done a pretty deep dive today. Thank you so much for joining me, for lending your expertise to this really fascinating conversation about quantum computing, drug discovery, and the future of medicine.
It's been a pleasure. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
And for everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Nordic Venture Show. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories of innovation from the Nordics.